In Ois Yud Aleph, the Rebbe will explain Al Pipnimis Hoinyonim why Korban Pesach specifically has these both aspects of Yachid and Tzibur as it relates to the Jewish people becoming a people, and how in the first Pesach it was still Yachid, and then after Matan Torah they became a Tzibur, so that in the Pesach, in the Midbar, in the second year, it was already a Tzibur. Let's look inside, Yud Aleph. We can say possibly that the tam pnimi farvos korban pesach hot nizich beidin yonim. The inner reason. Why is it that the korban pesach has these both aspects of yachid and tzibur? Pesach is the zman haleda von Am Yisrael. Pesach is the time of birth of the Jewish people. Und der Fahr, and that's why driken sich ois in korban pesach are expressed in the Korban Pesach, the zwei Ktsovis, the Ketchunes, these two extreme characteristics was that Am Yisrael hat in sich, that the Jewish people have in themselves. Alle Iden seinen vereinzigt in ein Metzias von Atzibur. All Yidden, all Jews are united in one entity. They become a tzibur. All of them together are just like one whole story, which is one, like one body, one koima, one story. On the other hand, yet der Id farzich is an oilamoli. Every Yid in of themselves is a full world, is an independent world by themselves. Their mit is moving, so this we understand. Farvos der inyan von Tzibur in Korban Pesach. Why this concept of Tzibur in the Korban Pesach hat sich erst aufgetan in Pesach Midbar? This was first accomplished when the second Pesach, which was in the Midbar. Hagam as leidas Am Yisrael is given by Yitziasim in Mitzrayim, although the birth of the Jewish people was when they left Egypt. By Eden had die Hachonet zu Metzias von Tzibur, because also by the Yidden to prepare for that entity of Tzibur, sich aufgetan erst später. This was accomplished later. They were born then, but they didn't have yet the status of a Tzibur until later on, after Matan Torah. Because when they seinen zugekommen, when they reached to Vayichan, Shom Yisrael Neged Har, Vayichan, they camped. It's in a singular. They camped as one, Keneged Har, Ki Ish Echad, as one person. That is Lashon Vayichan, singular. That is when that new additional part that they became a tzibur was accomplished. Deswegen, but yet is Euch in Mitzrayim given der Inyan von Hakrovas HaPesach. But still in Mitzrayim there was the idea of bringing the Pesach. If Pesach essentially is tzibur, and tzibur only happened later, but no, but also there was the Hakrovas HaPesach. Unochmer, not only was it over there, Kamo v'kamo halachos from Pesach, many laws of Pesach doiris that apply to the Pesach of the generations, meaning for all Pesach, for all years, for all generation, werden abgelehrt davke. They are specifically learned from. Where do we get those halachas from? Them was a state by Pesach Mitzrayim, from what is written by Pesach Mitzrayim. So Pesach Mitzrayim is not something different than all the Pesach. This means as Pesach Mitzrayim is the Rosh, the Soid from the Speterdike Psochim, that the Pesach Mitzrayim becomes the head and the basis, the foundation of the later on Pesach. So we can't say that in Pesach Mitzrayim there was lacking totally. Weil was Am Yisrael is später beis Matan Torah gewon am Metzias von Tzibur. The fact that the Jewish people later on, at the time of Matan Torah, became an entity, a new Metzias, a Metzias of a tzibur, of a community, is as in an oifun, it is in such a way, was the Metzias und Chashivas von Yochid, that the existence and important from the individual was is mudgesh in Pesach Mitzrayim Canal, which is emphasized in Pesach Mitzrayim. Over there, everything was beyochid in their own home, and everything was done on an individual basis for their own consumption. And that was specifically in Pesach Mitzrayim in such a way where durch them need bottle. Through this, it does not negate, it doesn't nullify, nor bleibt euch noch dem als Metzias, but it also remains afterwards in its existence. So that means that the tzibur that takes place takes into consideration and still remains with that individuality that was experienced in Pesach Mitzrayim. And we can say, as euch in Pesach Mitzrayim, is given a kolponim amein von inyan hatzibur. That also in the Pesach Mitzrayim there was a similar something from this concept of the tzibur. Was where erzählt in Medrash. The Medrash actually relates as Kol Yisrael ham gegessen from Pesach Shel Moshe, that all Yidden ate from the Pesach of Moshe. The whole story there that they smelled the good smell and they wanted to eat. He told them to circumcise himself. So you see that there was a sort of a tzibur there as well. Warum we bald Pesach Mitzrayim is there Yisoid from Pesach Doidos. Since Pesach Mitzrayim is the basis for the Pesach of the generation of Gemus Zayin in Ima Kolponim and Korban for Nosei Doidos. So there needed to be in it, at least in that korban of the Nosei Ador, which Moshe Rabbeinu, amein von inyan hatzibur, needed to have something of the concept of the tzibur, and that's why there was that idea that they were all together. So the Rebbe brings down Ayoshid Beis that this concept that you have a Ayoshid Beis, Odi Nikuda, this point. The point is, as those was Am Yisrael seinen Metzias von Tzibur, this that the Jewish people are an entity of a community of a Tzibur is not mevatel the Yechidim shebei, and it does not negate the individuality that's in that Tzibur. Spiegelt sich euch up by Karbonis Tzibur Mamish. That also reflects, it mirrors also that concept by the actual communal sacrifice, which are actually korbanos tzibur. They are korbanos on behalf of the whole community. That even though they have the criteria, they come from communal money. It needs to be presented to the tzibur well, needs to mix in. You should not be able to see and tell anybody's part in it from the other one. It should be totally mixed in. It is no longer individual money from deswegen, but yet, so it's tzibur, but yet, it does not totally take away the mchelik from yochid, the part of the individual in Korban Tomid. In Korban Tomid, as we see, the Chazal Zogen, from Posik, as the Chazal, our sages of blessed memory, say in the verse, it says, Al Tefinem and Chosom, that Hashem should not turn to the mincha that they give. Hashem shouldn't turn. So Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, I'll know that they have a portion in the constant communal sacrifices, but also their the portion of the Bnei Korach should not be accepted. What does it mean? But it wasn't anymore a portion of Bnei Korach in there. So from this we see that notwithstanding the fact that it's mixed in, it's for moment Sibur and everything else, but yet there's still a connection with that Yochid, and he says, don't accept that. Nochmer, the din is, the halacha is, as a viele, wenn a yochid von dem Zibur, wird gewogen gegen dem Zibur, that you need to measure an individual versus the community. So there is an issue. The Rambam brings down, people say that if you give us one individual and we kill him and that will save the whole community, we're not allowed to do that. So you can't weigh an individual next to the whole community. Ismanit Navater. So if you weigh an individual and then you have the whole community, Ismanit Navater Oifen Yochid to leave them tzibur. So you're not going to give up and allow for them to get the Yochid because that's for the tzibur. With the Psak from the Rambam, as the Rambam rules, Im Omru Lahem Akum. If the Akum tells them, Nu lon echad mikem, give us one of you, v'nargenu, and we'll kill him. Vim lavin. If you don't give this one nari kulcham, we're going to kill you all. The halacha is yahargu kulam. They should all get killed. Va'al yimserun lahem nefesh achas miYisrael. Don't give them one soul, even one soul of the Yidden. So it means that the tzibur yahargu kulam, all of them, and still the nefesh achas is equal. He says, no, you can't do that. There's haste. Hagamas tzibur is machriya as a yochid. Even though the tzibur, the community as a whole, overrides the yochid, but but it can't negate, can't take away from his existence. In this case, we're not going to take away his existence against the even though it conflicts with the tzibur. And therefore, that's the idea that we see that the yochid has this strength within the tzibur, that notwithstanding, as we find by the Korban Pesach, that while it's a Korban tzibur, but it still has the individuality. Yud Gimel. Punkt vidosis benegayet zum tzibur klolus am Yisrael, just as it is to the community, which is the Jewish people as a whole in general, the same idea would apply to individual. These two movements, these both seemingly conflicting ideas, are expected, demanded from him. So Hillel says like this, both. Aleph, he says, mili. If I'm not for myself, who's for me? So that expresses that he is an individual. You have to take care of yourself. But Beis, at the same time, he says, if I'm just myself, what am I? I'm an individual? No. He is an entity of an individual. Anili, men anili, anili. Zusammen der Mit is a Ratel von Klal Yisrael. And yet, together with that, he's still part of the general Israel, general the Jewish people. If he's not part and just part of the Jewish people, he's nothing. And based on the above, as die zwei Nikudas dricken sich aus in Korban Pesach, that these two points are expressed in the Korban Pesach, the Yachid and the Tzibur, and how the Tzibur does not take away from the Yachid. Now, so we can explain the saying of Hillel, the mentioned above, in a hinting and in a light way, in a way benegay lePesach, as it applies to Pesach. First to introduce Hagams is the Chaych zu sagen, although it's not possible to say. As Bimei Hillel is given their meaning that during the days of Hillel was the custom to learn and Pirkei Avos ben Pesach l'Shavuos, that there was a custom to learn the chapters of Avos, Pirkei Avos, between Pesach and Shavuos. Bald Ober, why? Because Rabbi Yehuda Nossi didn't even organize the Mishnah in the times of Hillel, so there wasn't it. So we can't say that. But Bald Ober as a Torah in Nitzchis. But since the Torah is eternal, Koilan Minag Yisrael was Torah, which includes traditions. There's also Torah, so it means that this tradition of learning Pirkei Avos is a Torah and it's eternal. Darf man sagen, so we have to say, as der Maimer von Hillel, was is in Perek Rishon from Masechta Avos, that this statement of Hillel, which is in the first chapter of Tractate Avos, Hot HaShayches zum ersten Shabbos noch Pesach, has a connection to the first Shabbos that follows Pesach. In that year, the portion of Behalosecha was read on the Shabbos. No, I take that back. Sorry, Shaykhis, but we're basically saying because the Hillel, that Maimer we always read on the first day of Pesach, after Pesach, the Shabbos after Pesach, because that's when we start reading the Pirkei Avos. So we have to say that this statement has a connection to the first Shabbos of Pesach. Babir was the explanation. With the Ramon Betchilas Hasicha, as mentioned at the beginning of the talk in Siv Beis, what Hillel Gepaskin, Hillel ruled as Pesach is Doiche Shabbos. That Pesach overrides Shabbos. When we get at freer, and as we mentioned before, he does mitzad them that comes because of us Pesach had them together from Korban Tzibur. The Pesach has the definition of a communal korban. When the Gemara is not Messiahim, and the Gemara concludes over there, Adosot Gebracht, this idea that it was the question with the Bnei Seira and the Nisim. So eventually this led to Azmanot Memanev and Hillel as Nasi, that he appointed Hillel as the prince, as the leader. And Levet Meglach noch Pesach, so soon after Pesach, which this is the idea of Pesach, noch an Ismana Vera von Hillel as Nasi, after Hillel has been appointed as Nasi, Maimer v'Toras v'Eiros Hillel was his bekeshet to Korban Pesach. So we learned the saying, the Torah, and the lessons that Hillel, which is in connection to Korban Pesach, that made him a Nasi. So right after Pesach, because Pesach is what made him a Nasi, because he decided the locha that you can bring the Korban Pesach on Shabbos, and that led to his Nasias. So right away after that Pesach on Shabbos, we learned the statement of Hillel Yemeina Nili Mili. That Mahus from Korban Pesach, the essence of the Korban Pesach is a Korban Yochid. It is a individual Korban. Medarf em allein bringen from Moment Yochid. You have to bring yourself, the individual. Everybody has to bring it, and you use your private money, your own money. And also those that are counted on this Korban Pesach. That's the individuality. Only they are part of this Korban. But le'idach, that means im ein anili mili. We need this Korban Yochid. But on the other hand, when there's nothing ermuz having them together from Korban Tzibur, it has to have also the definition of a communal Korban. If he would only be the idea of just for myself, then it wouldn't override Shabbos. Then he would not have the leadership. Money, what would I be? He wouldn't be a Nasi. The only reason why he became a Nasi is because it's a Tzibur. So that's what Hillel was saying. So one could ask. So that's the derech hatzachos, what the Rebbe said in the light way, even though this is not the literal translation, but to say imena nili mili, that is the korban. But shanila atzimani, if I would just be myself, I wouldn't be a nasi. Kemen fregen. So then you can ask afilu if their korban pesach is a yishel tzibur, even if korban pesach is a communal Moses the Chom dem Tanai, but it still needs that condition as Rebbe brought up before from Kavuz Manei to have a set time of Tzuken and Deichas and Shabbos. Kinal Sibbeis, as we said before, is Sibbeis, that the additional tonight that it has to be that you have to bring it at that time. Zokt Hillel, that's why Hillel says, V'im loy achshov emosai. Not now, when, which means has to be now. Korban Pesach is kavuas manoi vidal. Just very interesting how the Rebbe brings us into the statement of V'meina nilimilib shnilatzmi, V'im loy achshov, meaning that Korban Pesach has the time of vidal nissen, and that's why it overrides. Eishudal. Kishem versus by Yeder and by Zich. Just it's like by every person, individual for themselves. Can't be just a Yochid, but they also must be part of the Tzibur. Likewise, it also, as it pertains to V'ahavtu l'reacha kamecha, is l'reacha also when talking about your friend. Love your friend like thyself. So there too, there needs to be that approach from Yochid and Tzibur. Says Yedua, it's known as the Inyan for Avos Yisrael, that this concept of loving of your fellow Jew, to welchen in the Zon or Zayin, any Jew that it could be, is mitzad them. Why is that? Because Kol Ish Yisrael Ki Ish Echad Chavedim. All Jewish people are like one person altogether. The Alter Rebbe is as Masbir, as the Alter Rebbe explains, as alle Yidden Zainen, all Yidden are the Ish Echad Mechuver Mevorim Rabim, as one person that is connected from various different limbs, but they're all limbs of the same body. And this, there are several explanations. Number one, Yeder Id is atel from Klal Yisrael. Every Yid is part of the Jewish people as a whole. K'maimer Chazal, as the saying of our sages of blessed memory, Ilu hoyu Yisrael chasedim, had the Jews been lacking at the time that the Torah giving the Torah, afilu odom echad, even there was one person short, lahoitza shchina niglis aleim, the divine would not have rested on them. We also say, kol tainis, she'ein ba mepoishi Yisrael, ein tainis. If you have a fast, but that doesn't include from the sinners of Israel, is not really a fast day. So, was das is nit mitzad a protis de kemaila fundem yochid. That's not a individual advantage or greatness of the individual. It's not a specific his. But those was is any from them klal. This is being one of the whole. Every yid is one of the whole. Number two, yeder id hot a protis de kemaila. Every Jew has a specific individual greatness. Because the Maila is Mashlim Dom Klau, that greatness, that makes up the whole rule. But the Alter Rebbe is Masbir. The Alter Rebbe is Masbir has a Sisvarana Maila in the Regel, if in the Reish, that there is an advantage in the foot over the head. Because Mitzad der Maila, from that perspective of that greatness, is the Regel B'Bechinas Reish. The Regel is actually the head. He needs to walk somewhere. He needs to go. So he needs his feet over there. The head doesn't walk without the feet. So the feet becomes the head for that aspect. So although over here you sense the specific greatness from them yochid from the individual, he says, but it's mainly not something which is important for himself. That's how the advantage adds to the wholesomeness, so that the whole is a perfected, more wholesomeness. Shas over the Alter Rebbe. The Rebbe gives even a higher, a third level. When the Alter Rebbe is mavayir the minyan from Avos Yisrael, he explained the concept of loving Israel. He says, it is not satisfied by saying, as kulon mas imes, that we're all fitting. We have one father. And that's why we're all called brothers, because we're really fitting and we're just as one father to all of us, not as Magdim, but introduces Vanefesh V'Ruach Mi Yedeya Gduloson Umaloson Umeshorshon Umekoyro Belakim Chayim. That the Nefesh and the Ruach, who could know their greatness and their advantage as they are in the root and the source in Elohim Chayim. You need to love the Jew for his greatness as an individual, as a detail. Nicht nur mitzadem was is a chelif of klal. Not just because he is a part of the general of the unergitzu in Shleim's Klal Yisrael, and that you add to the wholesomeness of all Yidden, but there is your own individual greatness. And also that level of love is like yourself. This is similar to limbs of one body. Although that each one of them is and needs to be its own individual limb. But they're still all of the same body. Und therefore, euch in dem Ort. So also in the place where Herzig blows the Inyan Proti from them Ever, where the only thing that is felt, that you sense over there, is the individual detail of that limb. Nit where is Mashlim Klol, not in the part as he brings in, fills in, and brings wholesomeness to the whole body. Binter sich mit alle andere Vorim als Guf Echad. Still, over there, it ties with all the other limbs as one body. So that means that there is a individuality, not just to bring into the klal, as in number 2, and not that we just need all of them to be there, but we're talking about also because the realization that each mila that they all have, and yet these are all milas part of one body. Through the occupation in loving thy fellow as yourself. From one Jew with the other one in the above mentioned way. But the Eberster, then Hashem, which is also called Reyacha, Zakadosh Baruch Hu. This refers to Hashem. Haftul the Reyacha, which would be going that on the Eberster, and Avet zu Eden, he will show his love to the Yidden. When they goyel sein from Golus in the Beit Yefanim. He too will take him out in these both ways. Number 1, you will be collected one by one. Every individual separately. Rashi says that the Eibishter is Oiches b'yodei mamish. Shem holds in his hand actually. From Golus, and he leads everyone out separately from Golus, each individually. Und euch dem Reacho Zakadosh Baruch Hu. He also leads himself out. Also, your friend is Reacha, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we said before, Reacha. Hashem leads him out also, because when Hashem goes out of Golus, B'shov Hashem Elekecha es Shevuscha. God returns with you, not V'heshiv, but B'shov. Kshen Asidim the Gol Shchinei Mohem. So we're all going out. The Noch base. All be united in this Kol Gadol, all become this great community, the Tzibur, Shuveinu. With the true and the wholesome redemption, Bagola Didan, quickly in our days now. And this is all Mesichas Chodesh Nisan Tavshin Lamed Vav. What a sikha. Probably one of the longest sikhas all the Rebbes bringing down all the cases where there's machlokes between Rabbi Yoshi and Rabbi Yonason, and all the each section of it could be a whole sikha. The Rebbe, in this case, brought it in all these inyonim, the halten kop, and the learning, good learning, and learning nachamal, and seeing the flows b'terosoi from the Rebbe.